Chinese leadership and the last president, who is standing for long, we know, was right away from the beginning bringing up the importance of this philosophy and this religion on the political stage all over China. So this is one high political stage. On the other hand, Confucianism is also very widely promoted among the whole population, not only through political sources, but through education, through teachings, little books for kids everywhere. What I was actually trying to find is the videos probably or examples of those little the books for Chinese kids where you learn the writing, because they are the texts that are used there are also from Confucian teachings. So you start learning Confucianism right away, the phrases right away from 3, 4, 5 years old. Chinese kids know it by heart, and my friends who are living still in China and have kids over there, they say that their kids are citating Confucius. I mean, I don't know any kids who would citate here Plato in our kindergartens, if we look at the political aspect of the teaching. But in China, it's the day-to-day reality. And here I wanted to just show my first video that I found. Not only it's books which are popularized, but it's also cartoons. So it's a little cartoon about the young scholar, so the young kid. It's actually present time, but he's wearing a traditional Confucianist clothing. And he's seeing Confucius and he says, "Oh, yeah, teacher, I'm happy to see you." And he's asking, like, "Where am I? Do you know where I am? And what do we need to do there?" Here. And then the Confucius himself starts introducing that problems that people used to face thousands of years ago are also right now our daily troubles. And then he is inviting the kid to go on and solve some learning problems. So basically then he starts explaining how it is easier to learn, how to be a good student. And we stop here. So that's just small intro. By this, I just wanted to say that it's all around. Confucianism in China is all around, on the high levels, on the bottom levels. And how did that happen? So we start then from the very beginning. Just a little bit of throwback into your previous lectures, right? So the texts that we use that we know most of the time when we speak about Confucius are the texts by Confucius himself, by Mencius, and by Zhu Xi. Right, and the ideas that we get from their text is that the Confucians developed the leading socio-political system of ethics in Imperial China. So the teaching itself was then introduced on a very high level and became then actually the prototype of the educational system. We know about the hierarchical social system that was introduced and that was also induced by the teaching of Confucius. And we also know about the educational system that was based on the state exams, and that's also what was promoted by Confucianist schools already in this century, but this was still based on Confucianism. And so this the whole perception that the main system, the social system of the Qing Empire that existed until 1911 was based on Confucianism as its core. We can say in modern words it would be perhaps an ideology, right? Ideology of how to build a society, of how to be a good student, of how to be a good person, right? The Zunzi, the most important value is how to be a right personality and give example to all the others. How to treat your parents, and to a lesser extent about the gods, right? So about this society, how it should function. All these ideas were offered by Confucianism. And then it all came to an end, basically, in 1911. So that's where the most important part of the lecture starts. The reforms that happened at the beginning of the 20th century, the changes that happened in China caused major social disruptions and differences in the society. And in the first role, these were the changes in the treatment of Confucianism as such. So the first important event was the establishment of the Republic of China after the Xinhai Revolution. Just a little bit of historical knowledge back here. The leader of the revolution and the first president of the Republic of China was Sun Yat-sen. He was not personally attacking Confucianism as such, not at all, but we just know that the state system changed after him. He did not live very long, unfortunately, like somehow all the leaders of the revolutions in Russia and China, at least, like Lenin, he died in 1920s, and then had to give on the rulership to other leaders. But coming back to Confucianism, the most important event that affected directly Confucianism as a state ideology, let's say, or the state philosophy, was the May 4th movement. This is a very important event. I will just probably help myself with more examples here. It started off as a student protest on the Tiananmen, on the main square in China. And it rolled all over China later on. So just to say how and why it started like this, I see if I see. No, I don't have the pictures of the May 4th. So then we just look at this picture because this was a picture trying to explain how it was. There are no photos from that time, but this is like a very good illustration of that period. So the May 4th movement was triggered by the results of the Agreement of Versailles after the end of the First World War. This was actually a very important event, and it also brings us now to the international level. Speaking of Confucianism or China is impossible in secluded area. We always need to see how the international events were affecting what was going on. So what happened is that the claims that China had after the First World War were not fulfilled. So what happened is that the official claims of Chinese government during the negotiations of the Versailles Peace Treaty were the abolition of all privileges of foreign powers in China, such as extraterritoriality, cancelling of the 21 demands with the Japanese government, and return to China of the territory and rights to Shandong, which Japan had taken from Germany during the World War I. So Shandong is a province in China, and before the war it was mainly German. Now Germany lost in the First World War, and Chinese wanted to have the territory back under its sovereign control. And they did not get this control because during negotiations in Versailles, in Paris, the Chinese delegation simply did not have much word to say. The most of the negotiations were held by French and American representatives, and even though Woodrow Wilson was trying to promote the rights of nations for self-determination, still they did not have much effect. So de facto, Chinese did not get the control over the province, and that sparked then the revolt. People in China were not happy that a Chinese word does not mean much, that Chinese cannot promote themselves on international stage. And additionally to this, all the previous failures of Chinese government, the lost in the war with Japan beforehand, were somehow piling up in a way that Chinese nation saw the weakness of the empire on all possible stages. And the population was trying to find what was the core, what was the reason why the empire was so weak. What happened that it could not stand up and fight against international problems. Hopefully that's falling. And the core of the problem somehow was found in Confucianism. That's why from this time on, from 1919 exactly 1919, Confucianism was on the low run. It was proclaimed a false ideology and false guidance for the country, and new ideologies were looked for. And this is also an important stage because at that point, then Chinese, it was a government, it was people, like the whole society was trying to look out then. What is there? What ideologies are there to incorporate, to implement in China? And there were two examples. One was liberal democracy, a Western example. And then on the other hand, there was Marxism in the face of Soviets that were already developing, right? And by the end of the First World War, Russia was not anymore an empire, it was already a Soviet state. So China was standing in front of the choice. And somehow after the ideas of Chinese delegation in Versailles were not fulfilled, and Chinese nation saw that everything that they fought for was not accomplished, they somehow did not find it right to follow the democratical path, so they joined the Marxists. This is one of the explanations. Of course, there are many other reasons for that. But China stepped on the way of development of the Marxist ideology, and very soon in 1921, the Chinese Communist Party was formed. Just a few years ago, there was 100th jubileum. Probably everybody saw it. It was established back then. Nonetheless, the government was still the Republican government, that was formed under the Sun Yat-sen, and communists didn't have as much power at all. Important here to say that after Sun Yat-sen died, the leader of China was Chiang Kai-shek, and he was leading Republican China from 1921 till 49, and he stayed the generalissimo even after that because he took his government and then fled to Taiwan. So why I would like to stand here, like to stop here and emphasize this? Because when the political struggle within the country started, the official line of the Chinese Republic was not against Confucianism as such. So actually it's Marxists that took a straight line against Confucianism. And while these parties were fighting, there was a civil war, there was still no official stance on what's happening with Confucianism. It was not as popular, but it was still in. And only after 1949, when Mao Zedong and communists took over the government in Beijing, on the mainland China, it was officially declined for communism to be seen as the main ideology, and it was really suppressed. While Chiang Kai-shek and his government, after having moved to Taiwan, preserved Confucianism as it was. So this is a very important point to understand, actually, our modern situation. I will come back to it at the end of the lecture. So Confucianism in Taiwan was developing differently from Confucianism in China. It was not as suppressed in Taiwan. It was living as an ideology, as a traditional religion, philosophy, without any claims. But Marxists fought really strong against it. And of course, Mao Zedong was one of the most fearful fighters against Confucianism and for Marxist ideology, for his own, then later on Maoism. He was the main personality from 49 till 76. So after his reign, officially Confucianism, after the beginning of his rule, Confucianism went down. It was not public, it was not popular, so the main ideas were others, right? It was about the fighting for new communist and Maoist values. However, the very important part here to mention for us was something that happened at the end of Mao's rule, and it was Cultural Revolution. So the last 10 years of Mao's rule were a brutal period where Confucianism was attacked again. not only Confucianism. Actually, it was a fight against all the religions and all the not right, not correct ideologies that were transmitted in China. So just to give you a brief understanding of the situation, Mao was 72, I think, when it all started. He was already an old man. He was probably losing his strength in the party, so he was not as firmly standing. And as it often happened also in the Soviet Union and in communist countries, to strengthen your position, you need to fight wrong ideologies, and that's how it was presented. So Mao claimed that cultural revolution was a revolution against the wrong teachings, and among these wrong teachings were Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, but also all the liberal ideas, all the Western ideas. So it was a centralization on Maoism as such. So it was a very brutal period, especially the first 2 years of it. It was marked by several massacres in different parts of China, when the people who were allegedly respecting other ideologies were prosecuted. Schools were closed. Actually, the whole functioning of the country was interrupted. Normal functioning was interrupted. Here are some pictures of the monasteries being devastated, statues being burned. There are also very famous pictures, and you can still see it now. There are big Buddhist statues next to the Yangtze River, and they were all shot from big guns. So, like right now, there are right now tourist boats like going around, and you can see these huge Buddhas. They're like, I don't know, 30, 40 meters high, huge, and they're all shot at. So these are the leftovers of the Cultural Revolution. It was a horrible time, and right now, none of the Chinese citizens actually see it as a positive epoch. The people who were pro-Mao, who were following his teaching, were forming into groups that was called Hunwei Bin, like the red, bands, yeah, thank you. And they always had the little books with Mao teachings. And they were, following the Maoism ideas, and it was pronounced as a new, right, correct ideology. Very hard time for Confucianism. However, 10 years gone by, the time has changed, and Mao died in 76, which was a little pause, for this cruelty. And right after Mao, the new epoch started. That was also the time of the revival. So Deng Xiaoping came to power, and very famously he started the policy of openness, which was de facto a turn to the West. So if we remember again, at the beginning of the 20th century, after the fall of the Chinese Empire, there were three choices, right? The traditional Chinese religion and Confucianism, let's say, as its main ideology, Western ideologies, and Marxism. So after Mao's Cultural Revolution and after his death, Marxism was put aside, and now democratical values started to be somehow more appealing for China. But it all started not with political values, but from economical values. So what then started firstly was the opening of the cities, was the reform of the farmership. So it was allowed to have personal private property in the city and also on land. It gave a massive push and to the development of China economically, and it was seen from all sides around positively. However, it was not only happening on the economical push. Of course, the political ideas, the openness, democratical values started penetrating the Chinese society as well. And then this culminated in the events of 1989. It was before the fall of Berlin Wall, so it wasn't really stipulated by it, but still it was the same year. The Tiananmen massacre was it was and is a very important event in the Chinese history, because this is the time when Chinese students started protesting against the old ideology, because due to economical reforms, there existed big discrepancies in income of different levels of Chinese society. So some people were poorer, some people were richer, and all the Western innovations that Chinese youth wanted to also implement in China would be the goal for them. So they went on the streets. It was I think it was end of April 1989, and they just, without any organization, started protesting for new reforms, political reforms. Students were sitting about 1 month on the streets, and then there were more and more people coming, and then it actually started being a little bit aggressive, and finally government wanted to stop the whole situation, and it was a very brutal accident, and about 2,000 people were killed. As far as I know, there are some other accounts as well. It could be more, but this picture with the tanks is quite a popular one. It was also a video. There is a video. You can find it on YouTube anytime. It was made by BBC because Chinese army then brought the tanks into the town, and this one person was standing against of them. He was not run against. Everything ended good for him, but yeah, it was a very brutal demonstration of power. How is this event important for Confucianism? With this event, it became clear for the Chinese society that the promotion of political values of the West would be impossible in China. So the direction of economical development would be a yes, political development based on Western example was a no. And that's why society then started to look for the roots, for the other possible ideas. And that's when Confucianism actually came back to light. So in 90s began the revival of Confucianism. And what is interesting, it started not from the top, but from the bottom, from the population itself. Because it was not suppressed anymore, because there was no propaganda against it, people just started reading again Confucius, not only him, and especially became then important in the academical circles. Books were written, translated. There were books written for kids again. There were conferences started to promote Confucianism as the religion, as the philosophy that was grounded in Chinese tradition. Again, the temples were slowly renovated because after the Cultural Revolution, everything was devastated. The state of affairs was horrible. So somehow, from the grassroots, it started to appear again. Yeah. And then slowly but for sure, of course, the government started seeing its positives in bringing the Confucianism back to the agenda. And that's where political use of Confucianism also raised. And here there are several aspects that I would like to touch upon. This is very important for us right now. So the PRC government and its officials started attending conferences celebrating, for example, birthdays of Confucianism. They have acknowledged him proudly as the great contributor to a glorious Chinese tradition. And the ruling party has over past 20 years or so been strongly promoting Chinese patriotism and nationalism, and Confucianism is presented as part of it. This occasionally gets away, for instance, when people have taken to the streets, because demonstrations actually from the beginning of 2000s were also very common in China. So these democratical roots were growing. But still, the government was starting to promote Confucianism as such. especially during the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, there has been a big opportunity to stir the Chinese idea on the world stage, and the government certainly took advantage of it. In this context, it seems clear that PRC government support for Confucianism is politically and even geopolitically motivated. And now step by step. So firstly, the government is reclaiming traditional Chinese culture as one of the world's great civilization. In fact, there is a wide-ranging strategy of claiming that Chinese civilization was the world's first great civilization. So this rhetorics, when I go into the rhetorics that is officially promoted by Chinese government, all this was not spoken about at all until 1990s or 2000. It only came to the fore after the realization of the vacuum without Marxism, strong Marxism values that were somehow diminished by cultural revolution, by inacceptance of Western democratical political values. Their government understood that they need to fill the vacuum. And here we go. The Confucianism and try to fill up this gap. So we have the Chinese civilization. Yeah, that is great, and that is also based on Confucianism. Secondly, Chinese government is claiming Confucius, the world-renowned philosopher whose ideas permits traditional Chinese culture, as its own. So it belongs to China, not to the whole world, but it's a Chinese figure that everybody has to admire. So for the past 20 years or so, the establishment of Confucius institutes all around the world was sponsored by Chinese government to promote this idea. Just to say, it's not the only organization of this kind. There are Germany's Goethe institutes and France, Alliance Française, the institute that also actually follow the same goal: promote Chinese culture, provide the Chinese language courses, to bring up the awareness about the Chinese civilization. That's an official goal of the institution. I'm not going into the rhetoric about the backdrop of this organization, but officially the goal is like that. Yeah. So Confucian Institutes as the landmark, as the trademark of China. In U.S., there have been like a major, huge amount of Confucian Institutes, and they were just closed last year, as far as I remember. So it's only now starting to come to an end in certain parts of the world, but because of the geopolitical aspect of this whole situation. Thirdly, the polemics that were started by Chinese presidents. The ex-president of China, Hu Jintao, was the first one to publicly bring up Confucius' values to the fore. He was speaking about the harmonious society, the phrase that was forgotten for the whole 20th century. So 100 years nobody spoke about harmony as a value. So it is clearly an attempt to stifle dissent, which is constantly boiling up in local demonstrations against government confiscation of property and other social issues. So harmony has been a Confucian watchdog since the earliest time. And that was the attempt to calm down whatever insurgencies of population, of dissatisfaction were there. And fourth and very important point that I would like to bring here is the incorporation of Confucianism in the concept of community of the shared future for mankind. Have you heard about this concept? Anybody? Community of shared future for mankind. Okay, no one. I also did not hear anything about it until I started really going deeper into the subject. But in fact, it's the whole big concept that has been and is being promoted now by China on international stage, even more than locally in China. And it's an idea that is even implemented in UN Charter, in several UN documents, because China wants to bring its values up. Right? It wants to promote itself. So, and I would like to speak about this concept because it's very important concept to understand actually Xi's and Chinese positioning on the world stage, their goals in geopolitical sense. And Confucianism here plays, at least nominally, a very important role because the whole idea is based on the mix of Confucianism, ideas of Menzi, and Marxism. But Marxism in its, not in all of its views, of course, but mostly in the attempt to combine political and economical. Because that's just a little bit stepping aside from the subject. Why Chinese are still holding on Marxism as such? Because this is one of the only classical political teachings that combines political and economical together. All the other teachings somehow leave economy aside, and Chinese actually pay very big attention to money. It's an important part of our society, and here this is the plus of Marxism that they will not give up. It's the economical development that should always support the political, and that's how Marxism stays still in. Oh my God, it's falling down. Sorry, gotta fix it. Working. Okay, good. So, just a little bit about the concept. The community of shared future for mankind, the concept, is a comprehensive Chinese proposal for a better future of mankind. Now I'm too loud. The concept originated during the presidency of Hu Jintao, the previous president, who usually used it for domestic affairs in China. So in his 17th Party Congress report in 2007, so many years ago, 15, yeah. He put forward the concept, I read it in Chinese, I mean some of you know Chinese as well. It's called 人类命运共同体, which was at the time translated into English as community of common destiny. And he firstly actually addressed it to the issues in China and Taiwan. So he was saying, quote, "Here we would like to make a solemn appeal. On the basis of one China principle, let us discuss a formal end to the state of hostility between the two sides, reach a peace agreement, construct a framework for peaceful development of cross-strait relations, and thus usher in new phase of peaceful development. The 1.3 billion people on the mainland and 23 million people in Taiwan are of the same blood and share a common destiny." So the concept was used by Hu to signify that people of Taiwan and mainland China belong to one family. That's the beginning of the concept, yeah? This unity that Hu wanted to specify. And then this concept grew out from this perspective and actually was expanded to the whole world. So right now, the paramount significance of the concept is revealed by the fact that it's incorporated into both PRC's and CCP's constitutions. It's already a part of these constitutions. And on the other hand, Belt and Road Initiative is incorporated also into constitution of the CCP, whereas the new type of great power relations is neither incorporated into CCP's constitution nor to the PRC's constitution. So the smaller agendas of China, Belt and Road Initiative, which is also a tool within this concept community of shared future of mankind, they are not as important. They are just tools. They are not incorporated into any constitution. However, the concept is, Xi was promoting it during his appearances in UN. It's also stayed in the UN text in one of the resolutions. I was looking for the text of resolution. No one from us would pay attention to this. But if you then go to significance of certain phrases used in the international political and also legal rhetoric, you see that establishment of certain terms that are later used in whatever discourse is very important. So Chinese want to put their step into the international political discourse and legal discourse by inventing this term. And about the literature on this. In Chinese literature, from 2014 until 2020, there was written 2,700 or something articles about this. So it's a major thing. It's being pushed all over through the academia. While in the Western world, nobody knows it. It's like hardly you can find any articles about it. So it's being really pushed, and not only by Chinese authors, actually. There are many authors from Middle Asia, from Near East, also who are jumping on this idea and start to look into it. And just to try to present what it means, it's the idea of the harmonious life on Earth, where each country is seen as a unique individual, let's say, who is allowed to do whatever he, she, this individual in this country wants within its own system, and however cannot interfere into the affairs of other countries. So this is a world system based on so-called Westphalian understanding of sovereignty, where non-intervention is the main principle. So it's respect, it's cooperation, it's economical cooperation. That's why Xi is always promoting his idea of development, that, mutual support, and also of governance, especially global governance when it comes to the universal problems, such as, for example, global pandemic, right? What was it with COVID? You all remember how China wanted to promote its help all around, how they were delivering for free vaccines to this and this countries, how they were, I think, in India one time there was also an outburst of the disease. There was not enough gas, so the Chinese government was for free delivering gas for the hospitals. So they all portrayed in a way that it's part of this understanding of help to each other, of cooperation between the countries, however, without interfering in the inner affairs of each of the countries. And Confucianism plays here the important role insofar that it promotes harmony. So harmony, and actually also the hierarchy, but the hierarchy within the state, right? So this is already a different hierarchy. So when we're speaking about the world order that Chinese government or Xi Jinping would like to promote by this concept, then it would be flat, because all the countries are seen as equal, and it's even called democracy. This is also another term that Xi Jinping is promoting. This is like democratical cooperation, international democracy, where each country is free to decide for themselves. However, within each country starts the construction of their own system, and these systems can be definitely hierarchical, and that's where Confucianism for inner China kicks in. So this concept is being constantly promoted even until now, and it stays as a major international application of Confucianist idea to date. Then also the promotion of Chinese idea is also part of it. The Chinese idea is exactly the idea of harmony and help to each other, which is also somehow induced by Confucianism. And of course, we're speaking about the geopolitical interests of China, which are well, it's a separate subject, but Confucianism is the support of the Chinese government to maintain its high position. So, and based on this concept, we see that China wants to be one of the equals, standing up on the same level with other countries, like let's say, USA. So, and here we come to a very interesting subject that I also wanted to here bring up, the problem of Taiwan, that geopolitically is also many times addressed. You all know about the tensions that have been last autumn, right, in the region. How is that corresponding to Confucianism? Actually, I did not know even about it until I started really going deeply into Confucianism, but Confucianism might play a very important unifying role for China and Taiwan if they are to stay above the possibility of military conflict. So I just wanted to show here on one hand, why is it important for China to actually get constant access to Taiwan? This is always, I also myself didn't see it for a long time. These are all the little islands. These little dots. They are not Chinese, right? And Taiwan, if it is a Chinese territory, and if it's fully claimed, is the only way actually for China to go out into the Pacific Ocean without being checked by any other islands, which are usually the allies of the US. So strategically and geopolitically, it's very important for China to have the access to Taiwan. This is one. And second, Chinese still see Taiwan as part of the same nation, as I just spoke about the speech of Hu Jintao, right? The same people. And now, when Confucianism is again on the rise, and we remember that after 1949, when Chiang Kai-shek brought the Chinese government to Taiwan, Confucianism over there was also still intact. This is the ideology that actually can help the two countries unite. So there is a very big cooperation actually in academias of these two countries who would like to concentrate on common Confucianist, let's say, values, and not on anything else. For China, it's definitely of one very big importance, and the same rhetoric goes with Hong Kong. Well, Hong Kong is over here because it's also after 1999, right, incorporated now in China, but the social structure and the let's say the attitudes of the population are very different, right? It's not the same like in China. So to bring up these three very different in their development social groups, Taiwanese, Hong Kongese, and Chinese, China can very well use the Confucianism as the ideology that unites all of them. And when we were speaking, for example, when I was personally speaking with the scholars from Hong Kong, they were actually addressing this as a very important cooperation, future cooperation, and something they are looking forward to. So the cooperation between the three regions to develop common understanding of at least ideological grounds, and then further economical and whatever. So in this point, Confucianism is definitely gaining a very, very high, very big importance. So that's just a picture for it. And yeah, I also wanted to bring up a little bit of history of Taiwan, so also just for you to know. So historical sources suggest that the island first came under full Chinese control in the 17th century. In Qing dynasty. And in 1895, the island was given up to Japan after the loss in Sino-Japanese War. So the China took the island again in 1945, and then the government moved to it in 1949. So the island was always contested, let's say, and that's why it's also now very hard to, of course, military advance. And also what I wanted to bring up here, according to the latest social surveys in Taiwan, actually the majority of population does not believe that any military conflict will start. That there is actually a very big trust in the peaceful solution of the problem. And another important point is that right now, the Kuomintang, the party of Chiang Kai-shek, who officially first came to Taiwan, is not the ruling party; it's the opposition party. The party that is is the leading party right now, with the president and with the pro-American approach, is actually on decline. And at the moment, it seems like the Kuomintang is actually establishing very strong connections with the CCP in China, and they are trying to actually speak more about the uniting factors rather than on anything else. So I just wanted to bring it here as my personal opinion. I do believe and I hope that nothing militarily will happen over there and the conflict will be solved peacefully. Yeah. So, and we are slowly coming to the end of the let's say political part of the discussion. This is just a short slide that would like to represent how I see now actually the attempts of many of Chinese scholars in academia, because they try to promote local Chinese ideas and theories on different levels. And Confucianism, of course, as an ideology, is very old. You can't bring it as a modern ideology that would serve different purposes in different sciences. However, it can serve as a base for theories, like, for example, in political sciences or in legal sciences in Europe, Kantianism, and Kant is seen as the person who started it all, the idealism, the political world order, everything starts from him in political and legal sciences. And Chinese are trying to bring Confucius as such to the same level, and based on his teaching they would like to develop their own modern ideas that would be competing on international level with existing Western ideas. So this is somehow the trend that is happening in the academia, to develop non-European or non-Western centric theories of international applicability. And here is also just an interesting picture about how relevant this all might be, right? Because on one hand, we know how widespread the democratic values are, as an opposition of the values of Asian world. Well, they are autocratic here, right? But if an ideology as Confucianism is distributed and made popular among those who are not really democratic, there seems to be quite a big possibility to actually make it popular in pretty much half of the world, if not more. This graph I took from The Economist a few months ago. This was published. So these are like democracies, the democratical countries and non-democratical countries. Interesting to see that the US here is not actually as blue as Canada. You see US democracy is here on decline. And of course, the autocratical rule on Chinese and Russian side is on the rise. But just to speak about the relevance, the reception of the ideologies that are not democratical can be quite good, actually, in majority of Africa, right, as we see, and probably in South America as well, not speaking about the Asian part of the European continent. So, still it's very important. No, we're not there yet. And now we come actually to the interesting part. So having covered the question of geopolitics and Taiwan and the role of Confucianism as the political ideology, I would like to come down to how it's perceived by normal people and just by regular people every day right now. I personally was last time in China in 2019, before the pandemic, and I was lucky to get to Qufu, the birth town of Confucius. So I was at his grave, and I have seen the town. And I would like to say that it's incredible how the Chinese government is trying to preserve and rebuild the cultural monuments and cultural places all around the country. I mean, it's a special subject that there are claims that certain monasteries and certain temples are actually being created anew, even though they never existed, to enhance the feeling, and the understanding of the society, how important they are. But this is really still a place that was truly there. Confucius doesn't lay there, unfortunately. It's already well known that I think exactly during the years of Cultural Revolution, there were attempts to open the grave and take Confucius out. and he was not there. so somebody took him out already before that. But it's a growing industry. It's popularized all around China. It's a beautiful area that you go to, that you read Confucian texts, that you see all around. And I wanted to show you the video of the place, so of Qufu. So Qufu is a municipality in China, and in the center of this town is the complex with the old town wall. You go through, and there is a temple. You can go through the Confucius temple, and like all around, it's a big. It's not only one building; it's the whole area of the temple. Behind of it is the forest, which is a graveyard, and this is not only Confucian graveyard. So it's an area where aristocracy, starting from before Christ, was put down to rest. And it's very interesting just to see how actually people were buried in China, how they were perceived, and actually very similar to Korea. Koreans also buried their people very similarly to that. And Confucius is laying just there. So just a few videos for you to show how it is. We have it here. So this is the Temple of Confucius. Just 1 minute with the pictures. Here is just also very important to know, when we come back to the religion, is that when you go to the temples, and if you're not a specialist, you would never tell if this is a, let's say, Taoist monastery or Confucian monastery. It's impossible to tell because the rituals are very similar, the buildings are similar. People actually, the same people are going to both. The only difference that there is are the statues of the holy people. So in Confucianism, in Confucian monasteries, this would be Confucian scholars, and in Taoism it would be other people as well as in Taoist. Everything else is pretty much the same. That's how the. Oh, sorry. Oh yeah, that's the town wall. That's the town wall, and just to see, this is the whole complex. Yeah, so it's a very big complex, all dedicated to Confucius. And this video is about the graveyard. So here it says the tomb of Confucius. And I just wanted to show how it is. That's the graveyard itself. There are still stones. Nobody knows to whom they belong. And for me, it was interesting to see these little bumps, because somehow it seems like people are still burying something in there. I don't know how they're allowed to go there, but they are still doing this. So, and this is now the tomb of Confucius himself. Also like a hill. Yeah, that's the monument. And he's unfortunately not laying there. So supposedly he should be there, but he's not. And then, it's the whole forest out there. So that's it for it. And just before I finish my word and we start with the questions, I wanted to say that it's for regular people, it's there on a daily basis. And it's not a question of whether you are Taoist or Buddhist or Confucian, or you prefer Confucianism as your religion. Many people actually believe in all of that, and Chinese are very loose on that. So there is no strict line on how to do and what to do. You can believe in anything you want. And anyway, Confucianism is based in its religious part, in the part of the rituals, on anyway old tradition that was later on also, for example, used in Taoism and Buddhism. Somehow it's just transferred. So they all burn the sticks to deliver messages to the ancestors. They all come and pray for certain gods, for Confucius statues that they think that would bring them what they want. So it's very specific and very loose. So if you asked any Chinese, nearly everybody would say that he's Confucian, probably because they all believe that this kind of system of beliefs is truth, it works. There are certain ideals that they still believe, and especially now when it comes to the questions of respect to the elder generation, it becomes more and more important. Also on the governmental level, of course, to respect Confucius' ideas, because during the first 15 years of Chinese economical expansion, on the intrapersonal level, these values were really forgotten. So personal gain was really the majority, the most important things. And that's what Xi Jinping took actually as a shield, and that's how he wanted to promote Confucian values within his own population. Because there were so many Chinese oligarchs who just took money for themselves, definitely going around the law. And they might be placed as those who do not respect their position, who do not respect their family, who just think of their own gain, which is false according to Confucianism. So actually the fight against the corruption that Xi Jinping started at the beginning of his term was also done under the premises of Confucianism. And it worked very well. I mean, I was still in China when it all started. So Xi Jinping came to power in 12-13, right? I left China in 2015, and the first years there were so many reforms that were on official level. It was the tightening of the apparatus, let's say, but they closed the holes where the loopholes where the bribes and money could go through. So it was all tightened up under the premises of we are having a structure, we are having a hierarchy, and we must respect it, and we need to go according the system, because this is right, because this is correct. And it had a very good resonance in the population, actually. So there are very few people who would go against this kind of ideology, this kind of reasoning. So Confucianism as such is very popular. I'm not saying about how good people treat the Xi Jinping himself. There are lots of different opinions over here. But Confucianism as such is staying always on the positive and high ground. And here I'm done. Thank you for your time. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very insightful